I mean, not necessarily, but I'll tell you what will go up is jobs. The jobs will go up tremendously. We're going to have great jobs, jobs for everybody.
We're here today to celebrate American engineering and American manufacturing. We're also here today to celebrate jobs.
WestJet says it's buying at least 60 737-10 MAX narrow-body aircraft from Boeing and seven 787-9 Dreamliner wide-body aircraft.
Billions of dollars are no longer flowing south. They're quietly moving north. In just a few contracts, Boeing has begun shifting critical parts of its supply chain across the border, turning Canada from a supporting partner into a potential new center of gravity for aerospace. Quebec and Ontario are now winning bids once thought untouchable, taking over assembly lines, avionics packages, and maintenance contracts that for decades had been almost exclusively American. Seattle and St. Louis, long seen as Boeing's backbone, suddenly find themselves outpaced by their Canadian counterparts. Even Winnipeg has stepped into the spotlight. Boeing's facility there is expanding by more than 12,000 square feet, including a state-of-the-art freezer nearly 7,250 square feet in size, designed to store composites at minus 23 degrees Celsius. It's a technical investment that signals staying power, not just a temporary shift. For American investors, the consequences are immediate. Aerospace stocks have already shed billions in value, rattling pension funds and shaking confidence in an industry once considered one of America's most stable. And for communities across Washington, Kansas, and Missouri, the bigger fear is clear. If contracts can quietly cross the border, what else might follow? Is this just a short-term detour or the beginning of a deeper realignment in North America's aviation map? Before we dive in, tap that like button. It tells YouTube this content matters. And the ripple effects don't stop at the border. From Everett in Washington to Wichita in Kansas and St. Louis in Missouri, entire aerospace communities now face the risk of decline. A single contract leaving U.S. soil doesn't just shift revenue, it can destabilize entire towns built around one industry. Economists often note that for every aerospace job lost, up to 3 more vanish in local sectors like retail, healthcare, and services. When the factory floor goes quiet, so do the restaurants, clinics, and small businesses that depend on steady paychecks from those workers. The shift in avionics work toward Ontario adds another layer of pressure. American subcontractors who once dominated this high-value segment suddenly find themselves competing against a Canadian network that offers both stability and proximity to European markets. The consequences don't stop with the factory gates. Weakening demand for aircraft manufacturing can topple entire supply chains, from metal smelters to chemical producers that feed into Boeing's assembly lines. Even pension funds in states like Illinois, California, and New York, where aerospace stocks make up significant portions of retirement portfolios, are beginning to feel the sting of falling valuations. In short, what looks like a contract shift on paper is already reshaping the economic geography of America's heartland. And if this momentum continues, the damage could reach far beyond the hangar doors. If you've made it this far, consider subscribing. It's how we keep uncovering what others won't say. To understand why this shift is happening, you have to look at the policies that set it in motion. What began as isolated contracts moving north is rooted in something deeper, tariffs that turned a once-integrated supply chain into a maze of costs and uncertainty. Since 2024, the White House has applied broad duties on imported aircraft components, a move intended to protect domestic industry, but one that has instead fractured the system it was meant to defend. Suddenly, parts that once crossed the border seamlessly now carried new costs, new risks, and endless delays. As Reuters reported in April 2025, tariff confusion could leave aircraft deliveries in limbo, a headline that captured the unease across the industry. Airlines, suppliers, and even regulators began to worry whether contracts could be honored on time or at all. Canadian officials were quick to point out the consequences. The country's Aerospace Association warned that engine and component repairs were becoming more expensive, not because of technical limits but because of policy friction. KPMG, in a February 2025 assessment, went further, describing the tariff regime as extremely disruptive, with the potential to break supply chain structures at their core. In other words, what looked like a tactical move on tariffs soon became a strategic opening for Canada. Where the U.S. created obstacles, Canada offered continuity, and that contrast is now reshaping the competitive map of North American aerospace. But Canada's rise is not just about dodging tariffs. It is about having the real capacity to absorb high-value work at scale. For decades, the country has been quietly building the infrastructure, technology, and skilled workforce needed to handle advanced aerospace production. And now that foundation is paying off. Take Winnipeg, for example. In June 2025, Boeing inaugurated a 12,000 square foot expansion of its composite facility there, complete with a freezer of more than 7,000 square feet to store advanced materials at minus 23 degrees Celsius. This was not a stopgap move, but the fifth major expansion since 1971, backed by a fresh 20 million Canadian dollars in investment. The message was clear. This plant is designed for growth, not survival. The numbers tell their own story. Boeing already generates close to 4 billion Canadian dollars in annual economic value within the country, supporting more than 14,000 jobs nationwide, roughly 1,500 of them in Winnipeg alone. These aren't just assembly line positions, but roles in engineering, research, and advanced manufacturing that anchor a long-term ecosystem. And then there's the Montreal-Toronto corridor, a cluster that blends research hubs, universities, and a dense network of suppliers. This region has been described as one of the few places outside the United States with the depth and scale to ramp up production immediately when new contracts arrive. It's a reminder that Canada is not merely a fallback option, but a ready-made alternative. What makes Canada's position even stronger is that it isn't simply benefiting from American missteps. It is actively shaping a long-term strategy of its own. Ottawa has been building an institutional framework designed not only to capture immediate contracts, but to anchor future industries. At the center of that effort is a sweeping Buy Canadian initiative, a program worth nearly 70 billion Canadian dollars that redirects government procurement toward domestic firms. For aerospace, this means local companies gain guaranteed demand at home, which strengthens their ability to compete for international contracts. Boeing itself has been woven into this framework. Offsets tied to the P-8A Poseidon program are channeling roughly 240 million Canadian dollars into 3 aerospace projects in Quebec, ensuring that global defense deals also feed directly into Canadian innovation. Add to this Canada's structural advantages, lower energy costs, and a political environment viewed by many investors as more predictable than Washington. For long-term contracts, where stability matters as much as price, those conditions reduce risk and create a competitive edge. Ottawa has also been deliberate in nurturing industrial clusters. By linking suppliers in Montreal and Toronto with European partners, Canada is expanding the pipeline of contracts that flow through its aerospace sector, not only in civil aviation but also in defense and security. In short, while the U.S. wrestles with volatility, Canada is quietly playing the long game, one that blends industrial policy, global partnerships, and a reputation for stability. For the United States, the political fallout has been just as sharp as the economic one. In Washington, accusations quickly surfaced, with claims that Canada was stealing American jobs. Yet the tools available to retaliate effectively were limited. Pushed too hard, and the impact would fall not on foreign competitors, but on American airlines and the very voters the policy was meant to protect. Take Delta, for instance. Facing higher costs from tariffs, the airline signaled it could delay aircraft deliveries simply to avoid paying the extra duties. Across the Atlantic, Airbus was already weighing whether to prioritize non-U.S. customers, reducing America's leverage in negotiations even further. That uncertainty lands hardest in the states most dependent on aerospace. From Washington to Kansas to Missouri, the threat of layoffs is no longer abstract. Communities that once looked to the industry as a pillar of stability are now bracing for the possibility of job losses, and the political pressure is rising in parallel. The instability has spilled over into investment decisions as well. Mergers and acquisitions in the aerospace sector show signs of freezing, with companies hesitant to commit capital in an environment where policy can change overnight. The result is a chilling effect on innovation and expansion, even among firms that want to stay in the U.S. Meanwhile, capital and contracts continue to flow northward. Every deal that moves through Canada chips away at the industrial image once embodied by the phrase "Made in USA." The longer this continues, the harder it becomes to reverse. Beyond North America, the implications stretch into global alliances. In an era when Washington's policies appear unpredictable, Canada is positioning itself as a reliable anchor, a third option for partners caught between the US and China. For Tokyo and Seoul, that reliability matters. Both capitals have grown wary of being forced into binary choices, and Canada's steady hand offers an alternative path: cooperation without the same level of geopolitical risk. It is less about replacing the US and more about reducing exposure to shocks that ripple through supply chains. Even in defense procurement, questions are emerging. As Reuters reported in March 2025, Ottawa has been reviewing its roughly $19 billion Canadian F-35 contract, raising quiet doubts about the dependability of US technology. The review itself sends a signal. If a close ally is weighing alternatives, what does that say about broader confidence in American systems? Moments of US hesitation have only reinforced that perception. When intelligence and weapons flows to Ukraine were temporarily paused, allies took notice and began diversifying their options. Against that backdrop, Canada's growing role in aerospace production translates directly into leverage in the security and defense supply chain. By becoming a manufacturing hub trusted by both NATO and Asian partners, Canada isn't just winning contracts, it is gaining bargaining power that extends well beyond economics. The greatest warning lies ahead. If America's turbulence persists, the vacuum it leaves won't stay empty for long. Airbus, Comac, and even Russian manufacturers are ready to capture contracts once firmly tied to the US. And in that race, Canada emerges as both competitor and ally, reshaping the aerospace map. Already, the industry's center of gravity is drifting north. Montreal, Toronto, and Quebec City are becoming the new axis of production, with capital and influence following. WestJet's 67-plane order, MAX 10s and 787-9s, cements Canada's role as more than a fallback supplier, extending its Boeing partnership well into the 2030s. The logic is simple. If Canada delivers faster, cheaper, and with fewer political risks, airlines will naturally lean north. This is not a one-off contract. It's the first test of America's industrial resilience, a contest that could define who rules the skies for decades. So the question stands: is Canada turning a temporary advantage into a lasting shift in aerospace power? Or can the US reclaim its ground before the gap closes for good? Thanks for watching, and if this resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Every click fuels the truth.